What if I told you that every inflation number you've seen in your lifetime was a lie? That in 1983, the government made one change that has stolen trillions of dollars from Americans through hidden inflation? In today's episode of the TFTC podcast, we're going to expose how deep this deception goes and why Bitcoin might be our only way out. I recently sat down with Ed Butowski, founder of Chatwood Investments and creator of the Chatwood Index. Ed's unique perspective on inflation comes from managing wealth for professional athletes and tracking real costs across America's largest cities. What he revealed during our conversation will fundamentally change how you think about money, inflation, and why Bitcoin might be more important than you realize. Ed's not just another financial talking head. He spent decades collecting real price data from cities across America, creating what many consider a more accurate version of the Consumer Price Index. What he found was startling. While the government reports inflation at 2.5%, the real numbers show it's closer to 7%. And this isn't a new problem. It traces back to a single decision made in 1983 that changed how inflation is calculated forever. In this episode, we're going to break down three critical things: the massive gap between reported and real inflation numbers, why the government has been manipulating these statistics for over 40 years, and most importantly, how this hidden inflation is quietly destroying your savings. We'll also explore why Bitcoin's fixed supply and transparent rules might be the solution to this decades-old problem. Before we dive into Ed's revelations, we need to understand what happened in 1983, a pivotal moment when the government fundamentally changed how they calculate inflation. Ed begins by explaining how this single decision has affected every American's purchasing power since then.
That's when the government started manipulating the way that they calculated the CPI, because the CPI was at 13%. And the government could not handle giving out 13% increases in their programs, like Social Security and Medicare and so on. So they started to manipulate it. So the CPI went from 13% down to 3% in a year. Well, the prices didn't stop going up that much in 1 year. The government started manipulating the way they did it. So if you went back and used the old rules of how they calculated it, you would find that inflation was growing at around 8 or 9% a year.
What Ed just revealed is staggering. In 1983, the government didn't just tweak how they measure inflation, they completely changed the game. Think about this. When inflation was running at 13%, instead of actually addressing the problem, they simply changed how they calculated it. Suddenly, the official number dropped to 3%. This wasn't some small administrative change. It was a deliberate decision to pay less in Social Security and other government benefits. This manipulation has been stealing wealth from Americans for over 4 decades, and most people don't even realize it's happening. The implications are enormous. Imagine if a company tried to avoid paying their employees more by simply redefining what hours worked meant. There would be outrage. Yet this is exactly what happened with our national inflation measurements, affecting everything from Social Security payments to wage increases. When we talk about Bitcoin's importance, this is exactly why it matters. It's a monetary system where the rules can't be changed behind closed doors to benefit those in power. The government's ability to redefine inflation has real consequences for real people, and what Ed discovered next shows just how deep this deception goes. What makes this even more concerning is how this manipulation compounds over time, creating a massive gap between official statistics and reality. Let's look at how Ed actually tracks the real inflation numbers across America's largest cities and what his findings reveal about the true state of our economy.
I sent out a request to all of them. Not one of them did it. So I thought, okay, well, then I need to do this somehow. So I got people on Facebook to go out to their grocery stores and other places and start doing it for me. So these are my friends, and they started doing it quarterly, and it got to be too much, so we do it twice a year. And these are the real out-of-pocket costs that people spend money on to keep a constant standard of living. So in California, it won't surprise you that their cost of living increase is far greater than Taos, New Mexico is. And New York is going to be a lot greater than Denver is. Although it's interesting to note that a lot of Democrat cities where there's a heavy spending in the cities, their cost of living increase is far greater than red cities.
The Chatwood Index reveals something the government doesn't want you to see. The true cost increases Americans face every day. By tracking actual prices in stores across the country, Ed created what many consider a more accurate picture of inflation than the government's manipulated statistics. Think about this. While official numbers might show 2.5% inflation, real costs in many cities are increasing 2 or 3 times faster. This isn't just about numbers on a page. It's about families struggling to maintain their standard of living while official statistics pretend everything's fine. What's particularly alarming is how these cost increases vary across different cities, showing how local policies and spending decisions can accelerate the erosion of purchasing power. This kind of systematic manipulation is exactly what Bitcoin was designed to prevent. Its transparent, immutable rules mean that no one, not the government, not the Federal Reserve, can change how it works to suit their needs. The beauty of Bitcoin's design is that it operates on mathematical certainty rather than political convenience. The gap between official numbers and reality exposes a fundamental flaw in our current system, one that becomes even more apparent when you see who this manipulation hurts the most. While younger workers might be able to demand higher wages or switch jobs to keep up with rising costs, there's a whole generation of Americans who are trapped in the system. Next, Ed explains how this hidden inflation is devastating America's retirees and why the problem keeps getting worse with each passing year.
So they're looking to the CPI to be adjusted realistically, but like just now you had a 2.5% growth for January 2025. Well, anybody who thinks that their cost of living increase is only 2.5%, they're absolutely misguided. So they're going to be they're going to be spit in their face by about 5 to 7%. Their lives are going to get harder. That's why grandmothers and grandfathers' presents get worse as the years go on, because they're living off of this money, and they can't keep pace with the cost of living increase.
The human cost of this deception is devastating. When Ed talks about a 2.5% increase versus the real 5 to 7% people are experiencing, he's describing a hidden tax that's slowly draining wealth from everyday Americans, particularly the elderly and those on fixed incomes. Every year, the gap between what people receive in Social Security and what they need to maintain their standard of living grows wider. The compounding effect of this manipulation is staggering. After just a decade, the difference between official and real inflation can mean the difference between a comfortable retirement and financial hardship. What's particularly troubling is how this system creates a false sense of security, leading people to believe their retirement savings will be adequate when the real numbers tell a very different story. This is where Bitcoin's fixed supply becomes crucial. It can't be manipulated like these inflation statistics. While Bitcoin's price may fluctuate, its fundamental rules are transparent and unchangeable. Think about this. If you'd saved in Bitcoin over the past decade instead of dollars, you wouldn't just have protected yourself against official inflation, you'd have protected yourself against the real inflation that's been hidden from the public. The mathematical certainty of Bitcoin's supply schedule stands in stark contrast to the opaque and manipulated nature of government statistics. This is why more people are turning to Bitcoin as a long-term store of value. It offers a way out of this manipulated system where the rules can change at any time. The choice between a manipulated system designed to slowly erode wealth and a transparent, immutable alternative has never been clearer. The rules can change at any time. Immutable alternative